have a very special guest here, Aldair from Muse, and he will talk mainly about product management, data-driven decisions, and this type of stuff, right?
Yes, correct.
Looking forward. Stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, and good afternoon to you all. As mentioned, I'm going to be talking about how Muse made data-driven product decisions. As you mentioned, my name is Aldair Borges. I'm a product manager at Muse. I've been there for about 5 years now, or 6 years rather. So Muse as a company is about 10 years old in total, so I've been there for a fair amount of time. For those of you that don't know, what is Muse? So Muse is essentially a space management solution. We're one of the first players in the hospitality market to move properties from on-premise solutions to the cloud, which has obviously allowed us to really reinvent the problems that were solved 30 to 40 to 50 years ago, where most systems were what we call property management systems. They're basically what you see when you walk into a hotel and there's a receptionist checking people in and checking people out. But where we see it is that we can actually go beyond just managing the property or the rooms. We should be looking at total space utilization and seeing how hotels can make data-driven decisions to utilize their spaces and optimize revenue, but also create a great experience for guests. So it's a combination of B2B, B2C, and fintech products all bundled up into one. So I split my talk into 3 very simple parts: the why, how, and what. Where why is looking at the problems we encountered and why we started using data to make decisions within the product organization. And then how we actually leveraged that data to manage growth within Muse. And then the key learnings that we got throughout the way, because we did make mistakes just like anybody else, and we're also still learning. So we'll start with the first question that every product manager and 5-year-old has in common, which is why. But before we do, how many people use data in their day-to-day here to make decisions at work? Show of hands. How many people are data analysts? None? Product managers? Couple? Awesome. So hopefully this applies to you as well. Okay, so to give you some perspective, when I first started at Muse, this was about 5 years ago, we had about 300 or 400 clients. And as you can see, at the pace of growth that we've been on, like right now, we're at about just over 4,000 clients. So it's been an absolute rocket ship. It's been from when I first moved here, it was about 40 people in the company. Now there's 800 people globally on multiple continents. Throughout that stage, we've had multiple acquisitions, we've had multiple rounds of investments, we've constantly been growing our product line and solving more and more complex problems within the hospitality industry. So in order to manage this growth, we have to be so smart about the decisions we make, because of course we're not the only player in the market, which means we are dealing with a lot of competition, but also we have to make sure we're making the right decisions as we grow. So we'll start off with the problems. So right now at Muse, we have continuous deployment. So we have about 4 releases a day. That's about 1,400 releases a year, give or take. Of course, it's not always 4 a day, so a little bit more. And throughout that entire process, we have a continuous feedback loop and continuous development cycle. Now that's across about 25 product teams now. So you can imagine the amount of changes that are going out to our users on a daily basis and the amount of decisions that we have to make constantly. Which means, of course, we have to test a lot of assumptions between actually running experiments and pushing information down out to live code. Every decision we make counts. If we are going to meet the growth that we are trying to get to right all the way to the enterprise segment, we have to be smart about how we grow. Which means throughout every single feedback loop, we have to be able to measure the impact of our decisions. So both understanding the value that we have to our users, but to also explain to our leadership why we made the decisions, whether they were good decisions and we want to carry on, or they were bad decisions and we need to go a different direction. The core part of this is that we have to be validating ideas continuously and rapidly at scale. I love this quote. This is one of the quotes one of my former colleagues told me by economist William E. Demings, which is, "In God we trust, to all others bring data." No matter what you have in the room, fact is fact. More problems. So we started off in the early stages with Google Analytics, which was completely fine because we had just one B2B web application and a couple of open APIs that we're playing around with. The problem with that is that it was quite slow and it was limited in our ability to deep dive in data, right? So good data should always tell a story. You never look at one chart and go, okay, that's awesome, I'm going to carry on, what I'm doing is great, right? You should be constantly disproving your hypotheses or trying to work towards that. And you're always asking more questions and diving into more and more information. Which then led us to the next problem. Most of the questions that we had to answer when we were doing deep dives meant that we had to consult data engineers or our actual software engineers so that we can make decisions. And obviously, if your software engineers are looking up things in the database and running queries for you, they're not writing code and they're not pushing things to production, so you're already falling behind in the decisions that you need to make. Then, of course, there was measuring usability. So as we started to realize that a lot of what we're going to be doing in the future, so in the next 5 to 10 years, is going to be a lot of process optimization. So really looking at decreasing the time people spend on the screen in hotels so they can actually spend time with guests. So a lot of automation will be very much part of our future. So our design and our usability is incredibly important to us. So what we effectively then split our data into is to two fields of thought, where there's interaction data and transaction data. When we look at interaction data, it is what are people actually doing on the system? How are they clicking around? What workflows are they taking? If we move workflows and change them or adjust them or move a button to a different area, try decrease workflows, will things go faster? So really pure usability. But that only works for the parts of the system where people are actually actively on screen. As I mentioned, we have a whole host of products, right? So we have an entire open API. We also have to understand how our partner is using our API. Are they pulling it too often? Is the API performing as it needs to be? Are their workflows working well enough to service our clients as well? Then we've, of course, got a marketplace for those partners. Then we've got the fintech side of the company that's also managing that, as well as mobile applications on Android and iOS, built on Flutter and Android in general. To give you a perspective of the problems we're trying to solve, I showed you that growth chart. We started at the top with what we call Muse operations, right? So that's that application that your receptionist is using just to check people in and out. Then we expanded beyond that. We opened up our APIs, allowing integrations to plug and play within the hotel, which is great because then hoteliers could do analytic systems into their property to actually see how it works. They could plug in revenue management systems. So similar concept to you have with airlines where every seat is priced differently, so they can do that with the hotel beds. Then we had the guest journey. So we have applications that you use every time you're booking into a hotel, when you're checking yourself in, ordering things online, your booking engine, the standard stuff that we use every day when we're traveling. Then of course we had acquisitions. We recently acquired a point of sale, I think about 2 years ago now, that was fully built on Android. For all of these products, we have to constantly understand how they're being used so that we can make those decisions. And when you scale that up in terms of the product leadership, they want to know, how is the product performing? Why have you made these decisions and what is the impact to the user? Right? So through the scope of everything we have to do, data has become incredibly important for us. So how do we fix the problems that we encountered? So this has really been quite a journey for us. And we really set this out with just a single outcome, which is how to reduce the time to acquire meaningful and insightful data for our teams, and that's all our product teams, right? Not just product managers, not just designers, also our researchers as well. So we'll start with phase one, the SQL era, or SQL. So pros, super affordable. We could set it up really quickly, but of course it had a lot of cons. It meant that there was a learning curve. Suddenly we were going to be teaching a whole bunch of people how to use SQL, which you don't do in a week, right? It's going to take an incredibly long time. So then we also have new starters, bearing in mind that we're growing so quickly. You're not going to tell a new starter that, hey, in order to join our company, you have to learn SQL to do anything in your job. They're going to be like, no, thank you. Then there's, of course, limited interest. So does somebody want to learn an entire language to do their job? Probably not. And it's a long time to value, right? It's a huge investment of time, whereas like being able to use it was relatively cheap for us in terms of the resources that we had. And then of course that meant it was complex to scale. Would we be able to go from 300 or 400 clients and manage this progressively? And would we be able to do it at 4,000? No. So then we went to phase two, what I call the Power BI era. So this one was really great. It was when we first started figuring out maybe no-code tools are better than trying to teach everybody some sort of coding language, which meant, okay, we need less development time. But it obviously had setup problems. We had to manage access requirements as we scaled. Again, training new employees was also substantially harder. Power BI was also much, much more expensive. As we grew and as we had more licenses, it meant that the cost was going up and up. Was it still worth us investing that as an organization and investing managing the database and pushing just the right amount of information there? No, it was way too much to do. So then we moved over to what was then my favorite era, the Azure era, right? So this was way faster. Suddenly we had a much more intuitive system where we could easily go in as PM or designers and actually pull data ourselves. You could actually create great visualizations and charts and share them easily with the leadership team or the rest of the company. There's a much shorter learning curve than most of the other applications that we had used. But of course, some downsides as well. It was low code, not no code. So again, pretty steep barrier to entry. We have to think at the rate that we're growing, and right now we have about 30 to 40 new starters every month. That's a lot of time to try to teach people, and bearing in mind not all of those people have experience in coding, or it might be their first time in a tech company or they're straight out of university. It was just too difficult to be able to teach people this and to manage it at scale. Then there's the phase that we've recently moved into, which is that ability to understand the interaction and transactional data. Now we're looking at, okay, how do we empower our design teams, our product managers, but also enable everybody in the organization to have more self-serve tools that they can find that information. With tools like Heap and tools like Gainsight, we're now able to actually allow people to go in and pull whatever data they need. It takes about 5 days to get everyone ramped up. Maximum is about 3 days of training, and then off, they're done, they can do whatever they want really. And with Looker, it's great because it combines all the data, both interaction and transactional data, into one place, so you can create some pretty amazing charts. And again, it's pretty much I'll say Looker is more low code than no code, because you can extend and really dig into it if you have the ability to. But this means that our data engineers are now saving way more time, because they're not pulling queries about when is the last time someone clicked on a button, right? They're solving really complex problems, which is what they should be doing and what they should be focusing on. So if we look at the interactional data, just to give you an understanding of how we used it, if we look at checking in a person, for example, we played around a bit with the workflows for checking people in. We slightly altered it so we could see, okay, in the previous period, if we do this workflow, maybe it goes faster. But maybe if we update it, it's probably gone a little bit slower. And this is all information that we can get in real time. With tools like Heap, you went from waiting for like weeks and then days to pull data to under 5 minutes. You could create a chart like this to actually understand how your users are doing. Now, if you think about it across a client base of 4,000 hotels, so we have about 30 to 50,000 users a day, right? You can get results and answers incredibly quickly, right? You have millions of people checking out from hotels around the world every single day. So a single change, you can see the reaction in 2 or 3 days, how it impacts a user's behavior. And then you scale that up and combine it with interaction data. And this is an example from a help center we built, where we're able to pull the interaction data into Looker. So you could see how many people opened the help center when they searched for an article, and then there was a recommendation put up and clicked on that article. You would be able to see that. And if it wasn't helpful, and then it's still submitted as a support ticket, you could see that right at the bottom of the funnel. Pretty great. We moved that from our utilization tool over to Looker, so the whole company has access to it. Then you're able to understand the percentage of case deflection, right? So how easy is it to get users to actually self-serve themselves, which means we don't have to hire so many people on the support team because they're managing everything themselves, right? So ideally, that successful deflection should be continuously growing over time, because when you combine it with the transactional data, so how people are actually searching, so we're able to see this in a database, what people are searching for and what they can't find, right? So that helps our documentation team understand that, okay, we should probably start writing articles for this specific functionality, But sometimes, even on the product side, it meant that we could see that people were searching for functionality that they may have expected in a previous system or in their previous property they worked at that we didn't even have yet. So we started getting really quick insights on how people are using the system and how they wanted to as well. Then you can do sort of more fun, simple experiments, like how do we decrease the time to closing support tickets? Our support team kept complaining that they had lots of back and forths between clients trying to figure out what the problem was. So we're like, okay, let's just throw a Dropbox in there and allow people to download photos. So you could have screenshots of what was actually happening in the system. Again, we can put that all in a single dashboard in one place, right? So multiple stakeholders in the entire organization can actually read this dashboard and make actual business decisions in real time. Then the next is what we're figuring out now, which is more the contextual feedback, which is what are they doing and also why. So when we're looking at optimizing those workflows, we now, and this is what we're working on now, is actually being able to do things like trigger surveys when somebody is doing a specific workflow. So you can run an A/B test, and if somebody's taking a while to do a workflow, trigger a survey based on that and ask them for their immediate response. It's very minor, it's not as intrusive, and you can do it for a small amount of people on the client base, and it just helps to give a lot of context into what's happening. Of course, we spend a lot of time actually doing interviews with customers and speaking to them, but there's only so many people you can speak to, right? There's no ways, if we were to spend our days speaking to our entire client base, it would take ages, right? So this shortens that time where we can actually do customer interviews, but also we also have more context from people on the ground. One of the problems that we often had was when you organize customer interviews, it's going to be like the general manager or somebody coming to the interview, but they're not checking people in every day, right? So this gave us access to people that actually use the product to get valuable feedback. So this is the phase that we're really looking at now. I mentioned earlier we have this concept called user disengagement that we're working on, which is we want people to have an experience when they're going to a hotel. We don't want long queues and like people just getting frustrated off a flight, right? If you've ever flown with a family and young kids, you know getting off a 2.5-hour flight with a 5-year-old is not nice when you have to wait a whole 30 minutes in reception and they're asking you, can we just go? Like they don't want to be there. So that's one of our missions to stop. How do we fix that process? And this sort of information really helps us get in front of the users that we can make a difference for. So a couple of key takeaways. Think deeply and move quickly. If you really think about what you're working on and you analyze the information around you, it's not just qualitative information, right? It's also the quantitative that you can carry out as well. That makes you make much faster, smarter decisions so that when you're building, you're not spending time reiterating over things that don't have value. Then it's also defining clear problems. As you start to play around with data tools, sometimes it's so easy to get lost in creating these amazing charts and great visuals, but you have to make sure that what you do has value and to focus on creating relevant information that has an impact on what you're trying to work on. I really like this quote by Virgil Abloh, which is the 3% rule. Essentially, and he's probably one of the world's best designers, and he basically coined that in order to change people's perspective, you don't have to make a massive change, right? We often make small iterative changes. And if you combine that ability with like data and the qualitative and quantitative feedback, it allows you to do just that. Small iterations that allow you to move faster, right? So again, thinking deeper to make better decisions for the future. I am sometimes cautious about this one, which is democratizing access to data. The one thing that slowed us down in the beginning was having to constantly go through the data engineers, all the software engineers, just to get really basic information about what our users are doing in the system. There's obviously different levels in different industries of the permission that you have and the data that you can access. But if you give more access to the information of the people who are making decisions in real time, whether it's your UX designers, your product people, give them access because you'll move so much faster. And the last part is, well, not last part, almost last part, is that good data should tell a story, right? It's not about just putting one chart up there and saying, okay, what I built is great, I improved my hypothesis. No, you should truly work hard to say, if I've come up with an idea, how many holes can I poke at it? And how can I prove that it didn't work? And if I can prove it works, what is the story that I'm able to pull out of that and tell our customers? Data isn't only for us internally. If you're doing some sort of marketing around to new customers, all the information that you're gathering or making that decision that says, hey, if you use Muse, you can go from checking people in after 20 minutes to an average of 5 minutes, right? That's an impactful story, and that's how you grow products, especially when you're going from startup to scale-up level. In terms of ceremonies, there is no single ceremony to say, at this point in time, you should start using data. No, it starts all the way at the beginning, at discovery, when you're coming up with ideas, when you are talking to your customers, when you have shipped something, if you're running an experiment. Every step of the way, data is the ability to give yourselves checks to make sure you're going in the right direction, right? You should be able to decide during your entire feedback loop whether you're going to persevere with a problem and continue to put all in and solve it, or if you're going to scrap it and do something that actually has value for you and your users. Thank you very much.
So, let's have a question.
Yes.
And phase one, what you described is actually, you meant that the product owners, project managers, business owners, whoever in the company, they were actually using SQL to get the data about how the product is used, really, eh?
Yeah, and it was obviously an anonymized part of the database, right? So you couldn't put emails, you couldn't put detailed stuff. But we tried to teach everybody how to use that with SQL, which is great upskilling, right? Like you can learn SQL, yeah. Great, you can do anything. Put it on your CV, but have you tried to teach an entire organization how to use SQL? Everyone's it's like learning any language, right? Even speaking. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to learn French. Oh my gosh, I suck at French. I don't recommend it.
Okay, first day I was I thought I'm not getting the point, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And one more question. Do you know Amplitude?
Yes.
How like it, or if you can elaborate a little bit on this?
So we tried quite a few data tools out there, and we settled on Heap first when we were going for no-code tools, just because it worked better for our use cases of being able to pull that data and also put it in our data warehouse and export it to Looker, where we could then combine both the interactional data and the transactional data. So that's purely why we went with Heap, but Amplitude is also a really good tool. There are a lot of them out there. To take us a while to figure out which ones we wanted. We did demo quite a few of them.
Thanks.
Nice.
Okay. Another question? Yes, please.
So you said you have 4 releases per day. How do you do that?
So between, and Aaron can prove me wrong, between every single product we have, and now we have about 25 product teams. And each product teams, we have development pipelines for both front end and back end. And then we stage releases for all of those, and twice a day for front end and twice a day, I guess, in the afternoon for back end. So we have 3 environments that we release to. We have a playground, a development sandbox, a demo environment, and a production. So those 4 releases are to production. But in terms of releasing to the develop playground, it's probably substantially more. Right? We really encourage putting things out there as fast as possible. We have automated testing as well. So we got into Robot Framework, I think about 4 or 5 years ago now, to start getting in automated testing, and it's become part of our culture. So before everything goes out, it's automatically tested, and then we still go through and run manual testing. We have beta testers that go through functionality. So between it getting to production, a bit of code may have been developed for 2 or 3 weeks, and it might have actual customers testing it out and using it before then.
Okay. Another question?
Maybe I have one more. As you said, you have 25 product owners or products within your company, and how do you, or within your company, if you prefer having aligned product owning approach, or is it more that it differs based on the product owner of that particular product, the approach?
So the way we split our products is because we have that fintech arm, we have B2B, and then we have B2C. right? So that kind of at the top, that's how we split it. And then in fintech, we have more of the transactional side, so like how like payments are going through, and then we have experience side on how like people actually are managing those payments, how the users are doing. And then B2C is also a little simpler. We have a kiosk application. So we have, actually we recently changed this because we had a kiosk, a booking engine, and what we call a guest portal. We previously had product owners owning each part, but we recently changed that now so that they own workflows. So we have product owners that own like booking creation, like in-stay and then post-stay for the B2C application. The B2B part is massive, right? So like in B2B, we have what we call multi-property. So that's looking at like high level head office, that's analytics, that is managing users across an entire portfolio of hotels from all over the world and be able to update all the settings and deactivate them all, single sign-on, all that sort of stuff. And then we have what we'd call the operations tribe, as we call it. So we have and then on that level we have more tribes, right? So we have directors on each tribe level that have product owner or product managers rather under each, and each product manager has a cross-functional team. And then they own a section of the product. So we have, for example, like administrative, and that's split into different parts. You have like financial admin, the heavy back of house and setup. We have expansion teams, because with hospitality, there's a lot of regulation. For example, like every time we go into a new legal environment, we have to make sure we have all the taxation in place, and it's always changing. So we have, tribes, families, and then B2B, B2C, fintech.
And if you want to like answer like in a way like, are you more pushing that you want to have aligned these processes, like the approach for the product development, or you more?
Hold on. We have more time because there is no other presentation coming. So whoever is interested to discuss more, please stay in this room. Everybody else who is looking forward for another presentation or on the stage, you are free to go.